the fuck is that?
Hey, how are you going? Today I'm going to be looking at Amicus's fifth horror anthology, Tales from the Crypt from 1972. This was directed by Freddie Francis, and the screenplay was by Milton Subotsky, who is one of the co-founders of Amicus Productions. He's adapted each of the stories from the actual EC comic books. So in this there is stories from Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror and the Haunt of Fear comics. So the framework or wraparound for this story concerns a group of 5 people who are taking a tour around an ancient dilapidated monastery or church, and 5 of the people become separated from the rest of the party when one of the 5, Joan Collins, she drops her brooch.
My brooch? I must have dropped it somewhere.
So when they find a brooch, they realise they've lost the way, so they're looking for which direction they're going, and they see this, well, they hear this door open. This door leads them into a crypt. There's no other way in or out. So having seen that this crypt is empty, they proceed to, they begin to try and exit, but then the door shuts before they can get to it.
There's no way out there.
Now this guy is in the credits, is called the Crypt Keeper. He's played by Sir Alf Richardson. And he instructs the group of 5 to take a seat, then proceeds to question each of the group in turn as to what their plans for the immediate future are, or what's going on in their life. And so the first person to be inquisited, if that's a word, is Joan Collins.
Why did you come in here?
I don't know, I was just driving by and something made me.
And what are your plans when you leave here?
Plans?
Plans.
She plays a woman called Joanne, and her story starts out, and it's Christmas Eve, and we see Joanne's husband.
To Joanne, the best wife in the world, love from Richard, and a big kiss.
So it shows that the husband actually loves his wife. I say the idea for the shot's very good, but because the blood effects in this are a bit lacking, to say the least. So then Joan Collins proceeds to amble about, clearing up the scene and such. While she's doing this, she opens the present that her husband put under the tree for her, and it turns out it's this brooch, the same brooch that she was wearing that she dropped at the beginning in the framework. So that gives you a bit of a clue as to what might be going on here. So anyway, after that she's clearing up the evidence that she's murdered her husband, and she has the radio on as a news bulletin.
A man described as a homicidal maniac has escaped from the hospital for the criminally insane. He is 6'3" tall, 210 pounds, dark eyes, bald, and may be wearing a Santa Claus costume taken from a shop in Burley.
Joan Collins, she just continues clearing up like the husband's blood and that. So while she's doing all this, who should show up at the fucking house but the nutter dressed up as Santa Claus? And he's got some like sleigh bells on him, so he jingles and jangles a bit when he moves. And So Joan Collins sees him. Initially she goes to phone the police, she starts ringing, but then she realises, well, she don't want the police there because she's just murdered her husband and she needs to set up the scene before doing anything. So she scraps that idea and just like locks the windows and doors. So then Joan Collins proceeds to take her husband's body and like throw it down the steps of the cellar, the basement, to make it look like he's fallen down and cracked his head, and that's how he died. It's not the most elaborate, foolproof plan ever, but that's her plan. So she does that, and then she's ambling about. And she notices the bedroom door for the daughter's room, because they have a young daughter, and she sees that that's open. So she panics, runs up there, and sees that the daughter's not in bed. So she runs back downstairs, starts looking for her, and then you hear the jingling sound again.
He's here, Mummy! I let him in! It's Santa!
Then we see that she's let the psycho in, who then proceeds to chase after Joan Collins, and just before he does this, he pulls like a strangle move, like he puts his hands up like this. It kind of looks like he's going to grab for her tits for a bit of a second there. Which I thought that's kind of funny anyway. But yeah, then he chases her into the room. That's where that tale ends.
Nonsense.
Joan Collins has just like seen this, like the crypt keeper, like, you know, projects a vision into the minds of the people he's questioning, or something along those lines. And so next up is a dude called Carl, played by Ian Hendry. And so this tale opens with Carl going away overnight under the pretense of having some kind of business meeting somewhere.
When will you be back?
I don't know. We'll have to see how it works out. I'll phone you.
Did you say goodnight to the kids?
No, I was just going to.
But it turns out he's actually going to run off with his mistress, a woman called Susan. She's played by Angela Grant. So then they're driving along the motorway, and initially Carl's driving, but then Susan says, "Oh, you're tired, let me take over." So then Susan's driving, and Carl's having a sleep in the passenger seat.
No! I'm sorry. Bad dream.
And then they get into a car accident on the motorway, and the car is driven off. The car goes off road and crashes into a tree. And we see Carl like kind of lose consciousness, and it fades to black. From here on in, it's all from the POV of Carl's point of view, and it opens up, and we see the car they were in, and it's just there in front of him, just on fire. But it's like it's not even I thought it was a bit of an effect at first, but I think it's just how the flames react with the cameras, the film cameras at that time, and because it's kind of like out of a bit blurry, and the edges are kind of out of focus, like light shimmering off of it, and for me that gives it a really kind of unreal presence to it, like dreamlike quality to it. So you can kind of straight off sense that, well, something's not right here, is it? So then Carl sees this, and then he kind of crawls his way back towards where they were coming from. And he comes across a couple of people on his way. First he comes across a tramp, a bum, and this bum turns around to see him, look at him, and then like shits his britches and fucking runs off like in a fright. Remember, this is all from the point of view of Ian Hendry, Carl. So then he's walking in the road and some dude nearly hits him again. This guy's like, he's cursing him out to begin with, and he fucking sees him close up, and he fucking he pulls like a bit funny face. It was like, ooh. It's like someone's dropped a really dirty fart on him or something. It's like, so, yeah, then he fucks off. So eventually Cal manages to stagger back to first his family home.
Darling.
Then he goes around and looks through the window, and you can see that she's like, there's another dude there, who she shacked up with, who's a prick.
What's the matter then? Look, pull yourself together. What's the matter? Come on now.
What's the matter with you? Pull yourself together. Yeah, it's like, this dude's a bit of a cunt, you know. She don't have much luck with men, this woman. Anyway, so after that, Carl then proceeds to go to Susan's apartment, or a flat.
Yes?
Susan,
Who is it?
it's me, Carl.
Carl?
But she doesn't react like the previous people have been reacting to him. And he's like, what the fuck's going on? And she says, oh yeah, and all the furniture's back there. And he's like, what?
I don't understand. How did...
I brought it back. After the crash.
Huh?
And I was blinded.
Blinded?
And Carl was killed.
Huh?
2 years ago.
And at that point, as he screams, it goes back to the earlier scene where he's coming out of the nightmare and he goes, no!
I'm sorry. Bad dream.
And yeah, then it plays out again like that, and they crash, and then exactly the same thing. So and that's where it ends. So it's got this great kind of horrible, like, perpetual loop of this nightmare thing, which I really like. That's a really scary notion for a short tale. So yeah, then we're back into the crypt again.
What sort of game are you playing?
Game?
You're trying to frighten us in some way. What do you want?
To show you something.
It's a dude called James, played by Robin Phillips, and then we go into his story. And he is like very well-to-do, lives in this big mansion house with, I think I'm meant to believe it's his father. It doesn't actually state that in the film, but I suppose we assume it's his father. I mean, they could be lovers. It could have been quite a progressive notion for that time to bring it in a film. So across from these two dudes lives this dude called Grimsdyke, who lives in like a really shitty kind of 2 up 2 down house, and he's a bin man and stuff. And this fucking dude across the road, James, hates him because he makes the area look untidy, and he's just a real prick. So then this James character, he proceeds to kind of engage in a smear campaign against Grimsdyke, Peter Cushing. Did I mention Grimsdyke was played by Peter Cushing? I don't think I did I? Well, I just have now. So yeah, this James Robin Phillips begins a smear campaign against Grimsdyke. First, he digs up Grimsdyke's neighbour on his side. He digs this guy's fucking prize roses up, and Grimsdyke's dogs get the blame for it for some random reason. Then he and the other dude, the older man, he kind of coerce a council member to give him the sack from his job as a bin man, a council job. This Grimsdyke, he likes the company of kids, and this James tries to insinuate that Peter Cushing's like a bit of a paedophile. all these mothers, they'd stop the kids from going around to see Peter Cushing. In the midst of all this, Grimsdyke's shown communing with his dead wife via a Ouija board.
Is there anything you wish to tell me?
He gets a message from her that says danger. So you know, we can see that Grimsdyke's is into like some occulty stuff. You know, he's into spiritualism and such. The final straw with the smear campaign is when it's James excuse me, but he is. He sends Grimsdyke Valentine cards because it's Valentine's Day coming up, and he sends Valentine cards like from everybody in the town to Grimsdyke, and all of them have got like a really like horrible little rhyme or limerick, you know, like roses are red, violets are blue. You're a twat, you smell like poo. Not that, but yeah, it's of that ilk. And so this drives Grimsdyke too far, and he ends up hanging himself. And he's found a few days later by the wankers from across the road, because they've noticed they've not seen him for a while. So they discover him and they pay for his funeral. They attend his funeral, and it's like. So then it skips to a year later, and once again it's Valentine's Day. It looks like the most shallow grave as well, because he just basically sits up and he comes out of the dirt, and you know he's like a year dead, so he's a zombie-looking corpse dude. And we see a close-up of Peter Cushing zombie version as he like looms up on James, and James screams, and they're like. We see Peter Cushing puts his hands over like the screen, the camera, and then it fades to black and cuts to morning. It's got around like the cards Grimsdyke was sent the previous year.
You were mean and cruel. Right from the start. Now you really have no.
Unwraps the paper entirely, and he discovers James's heart has been like put in there. So Peter Cushing's zombie rips his heart out, and that's where that story ends pretty much. For some reason, the heart's still beating as well. It's like how does that work? But just for effect. Just for effect. So then we're back to the Crypt.
What am I doing here? You'll see.
And it's a dude called Ralph, played by Richard Green. So this story concerns Ralph, who is a unscrupulous businessman.
You've done dishonorable things in your life before, in your business life.
Hard, ruthless, and perhaps even cruel. Yes, to build up the Jason empire, sometimes I had to be.
No one has to be.
But now he's facing bankruptcy for whatever reasons. You know, his lawyer informs him either go bankrupt or you can start selling some of your possessions, like because he's got loads of valuables and that. So then we're at his house, and he and his wife Enid, played by Barbara Murray. They're just like looking for all the old stuff, all the precious stuff they have to sell, and she comes across this this statue they got from a strange old shop in Hong Kong.
We got it in that strange shop in Hong Kong when you were selling guns too.
For the first time, she notices there's an inscription on it, which is written in English for some reason. You know, it's an ancient Chinese statue, and it's got an English freaking inscription.
3 wishes I give, and no more, to each owner of me, so keep score.
So Enid like begins to wishes for lots and lots of money, and Ralph says, "No, no, don't do that, because this reminds me of a story I read in school called The Monkey's Paw." The story being like they get 3 wishes, but each wish results in something bad happening in order for that wish to become fulfilled.
Hello? Oh, hello, Charles.
I'd like you to come down to my office.
What, right now?
Yes, straight away.
What's it all about?
It's very important.
It's about money. I'd like you to come straight away.
So while Ralph's driving towards his lawyer's office, we see him get followed by this like this biker dude who appears to have like a skull mask on or something. And this biker comes right close up to him, and so Ralph sees him in the rearview mirror, and we see that it is an actual skull face, or it's meant to be. I mean, again, the practical effects weren't, or the makeup effects rather, weren't particularly impressive. You can see the dude's eyes in the fucking thing, you know. So it just looks like a dude wearing a skeleton mask, which is what it is. So then we cut to Ralph's lawyer receiving a phone call telling him that Ralph has died in a car accident. And he's like, fucking hell. So he tells Enid, the wife, back at her house. And he also informs her that because Ralph had like a life insurance with a double indemnity for accidental death, she could become a very rich woman because of it. And then she says, oh fucking hell, that's because of that statue that I made a wish on. I wished for lots and lots of money. So then Enid makes a second wish on the statue, saying, no, I want Ralph back here with me, just how he was just before the accident. And then there's a knock on the door instantly. And these like kind of ghoulish pallbearers come in carrying a coffin. Which has got Ralph in it. I keep wanting to call him Frank for some reason, I don't know why. But yeah, this coffin's got Ralph in it. And it's saying, hang on, he's still dead. I wish for him to be here before the accident, before he died in the accident.
Mr. Jason died of a heart attack at the wheel.
One of the pallbearers says, oh, he didn't die in a car accident. He suffered a heart attack and died, and that's what led to the car accident. So that's how he was just before the accident. He was dead anyway of a heart attack. So it's another wish that Enid's made us, kicked her in the bollocks that she doesn't have. So she's like, oh fucking hell, and then she decides to make a third wish to try and make it better.
I wish Ralph were alive now. I don't want him to die ever. I want him moving, breathing, talking, alive, now, forever.
And then Frank going, ah, like screaming in agony, writhing in agony and screaming and like, fucking hell. And she's saying, what's wrong? And then the lawyer says, oh, don't you realise he's been embalmed. His veins are full of embalming fluid burning into him forever. And it's like, fucking hell, pretty gnarly shit. And so Enid fucking goes hysterical, and Ralph's saying, fucking hell, do something, Enid. So Enid, she grabs a fucking sword off the wall, like an ornamental sword, and she starts hacking Ralph up, and he's like, ah, ah, ah. And you see Ralph's intestines. Again, it's a totally bloodless effect, but it looks kind of gross because it's used like kind of, I don't know, it still looks icky. So she's like chopping him up, she chops his hand off, we see that fucking flying about, like crawling about on him, very kind of Doctor's Terror's House of Horrors style. But fucking Frank, he's not called Frank, he's called Ralph. What the fuck's going on? So yeah, but we see Ralph is still alive, and the lawyer's saying, well, don't you see, you wished him alive forever, and every piece of him is alive and suffering, because it's like, fucking hell, again. It's like, really, it's like, so he's just like, he can't die, he's been chopped up and he's just in constant agony. It's like, wow, that's pretty grueling. So then this ends with fucking Enid collapsing to her knees, sobbing next to Frank. Fucking hell, Frank again. She's sobbing next to Ralph's coffin with him in it, and we can hear him still like in agony. And that's where that story ends. It cuts back to the crypt.
Well, what do you want with us?
To warn you of what may happen.
I don't care about your warnings. I want to get out of here.
Very well, but you should heed the warning.
So this tale begins with Major Rogers becoming a new superintendent for a home for the blind, and as soon as he gets there, he just basically starts like making cuts here and there, like to save money. So he starts giving them like half rations for the kitchen, so the food's like pretty shit, and it turns the heating off, and they're all like kind of oldish. Well, not all of them, but there's some like old ill people there who are blind. And yeah, I should mention Major Rogers has a German Shepherd, an Alsatian. That's good timing, wasn't it? Yeah, he's got an Alsatian called Shane, and eventually, due to the heating being switched off at night, and it's like winter and stuff, one of the residents dies of hypothermia. And Major Rogers is fairly indifferent about it because he's a cunt. So then the rest of the residents, led by a guy called George, played by Patrick McGee. Oh, Major Rogers is played by Nigel Patrick. I've neglected to mention that, I believe. So yeah, George, he kind of like leads this plan that they're going to carry out. So well, basically they kidnap Major Rogers and Shane. They lock him in separate rooms, like apart from one another. And then over the next couple of days, they get to work building something. It's not revealed what they're building. So and after 2 days, like Shane the dog, he's pretty ravenous and such. And so is Major Rogers. I mean, he's exhausted and that. So when they finished building this kind of like a maze to build, they let Major Rogers out, and he sees it's a maze and it just kind of leads somewhere. So he's walking along, and then he sees that part of the maze, both sides of the wall have been like, they've had razor blades like put everywhere along both walls, and it's kind of narrow. It narrows as well. So Major Rogers is like, fucking hell, so he just like starts to squeeze through it, and then Patrick McGee starts fucking about with a light switch, causing Major Rogers to like cut himself and such. But eventually Major Rogers makes it to the other end of the little labyrinth they built. And he sees that it's another door there, and he hears Shane barking on the other side. And then the blind dude's like, let that door open. So that's where that story ends, and then we're back in the crypt again.
Now you may go.
So Ralph, the character of Ralph, he goes to the door, and it's just like a bright white light when it opens, and he's like, there's nothing here. And then Ralph Richardson like lowers the boom, tells them what's happening and why they're here.
Where are we?
In a place where people go who have died without repentance. You see, I wasn't warning you, but telling you why you are here.
And then we see the character of Ralph falling like into the, what I assume is the pit of hell. So yeah, so then the rest of the party, they go into the white light to, I assume share the same fate as what Ralph did. And then that's pretty near enough where the film ends. Ralph Richardson breaks the fourth wall and says, "Oh, who's next? Maybe you," blah blah blah. That's where the film ends. Hello, as you can see, it's a different time, different day from the rest of the video. That's because I thought my final thoughts and my summary of Tales from the Crypt was a bit lackluster. Didn't get across what I wanted to, I suppose. So I'm redoing it now. So, Tales from the Crypt. The wraparound for this is probably the simplest we've had so far in this series. You know, it's basically 5 people being questioned by a mysterious otherworldly figure in, you know, like a very classical scenario for a horror film. But I really do like the wraparound for this. Like I say, it's simple, it's effective, it's atmospheric. Ralph Richardson is the Crypt Keeper. He's got a very ominous presence to him. And also, you know, the karmic element of people are answering for their sins under the guise of being shown the future, but what they're actually being shown is the past and why they're there. I think that's pretty cool. And so on to the tales themselves. The first one with Joan Collins, called, I believe, And All Through the House. I do like this setup for this one. I like some of the shots in this. So a lot of the time we're seeing it from the point of view of being like behind the fireplace. So there's like a line of flames like at the bottom of the screen. It gives it that hellish tinge, I suppose you could say. Especially in the finale where Joan Collins is being strangled and it's got the flames in front of her, so it kind of looks like she's descending into hell, which is, as it turns out, what she has done in the film. And also where she kills her husband. I thought that shot of from us having a view of like the outside of the newspaper is reading and just seeing a blood hit that paper from his side. Even though the effect was a bit, well, the blood effects in this are a little red painty. But yeah, overall this was a very effective piece. I like the karmic element of Joan Collins being unable to phone for help because of, you know, she's murdered her husband, and this in turn leads to her demise. Also, I don't believe there's any music in this that's of the score. It all comes from the radio in the actual piece, and it's playing Christmas carols, and that lends a very unsettling seasonal tone to it. And then the second story, which is my personal favourite of this movie, Reflections of Death. I believe this may be like the shortest of the tales. It is a very simple kind of setup, I guess, but it's just the way it's executed, and also that whole idea of like the perpetual nightmare, and the fact most of it's from his point of view, and also the music in this. It's very eerie and creepy, and just really suits it well. And yeah, just like the kind of unsettling, surreal nature of it. You know, it's like not like dreamlike. It's a word I use a lot, or nightmare-like. But yeah, I just love that one. And the third one, Poetic Justice. This is. This isn't a scary one. This is more just I won't say yeah, kind of depressing. It's about a guy that gets persecuted to the point of suicide. You know, so it's really kind of depressing. Even though he gets his poetic justice, his revenge at the end, and that's an effective finale, I think, which just shows the undead Peter Cushing walking through the shadows towards what's his face, and then pulls his heart out and writes a little Valentine's note with that in it. And also Peter Cushing's performance in this was fueled by his mourning for the recent death of his wife in real life. I'm not sure, because he looks haggard in that, so I'm not sure when that occurred, but because this came out the same year as Asylum, and Peter Cushing was in both, so I don't know if it made them back to back or if it happened in between the making of these two films. But yeah, it really lends just a great sadness to his performance, and this imbues the whole piece. Then we get on to the fourth one, Wish You Were Here. I think this is probably my second favourite of the lot in this movie. Again, it's just that whole idea of, you know, the mysterious statue that'll give the owner 3 wishes, but each wish comes at a pretty severe price. It mentions the monkey's paw in the piece, so it doesn't get accused of ripping off the monkey's paw, which is kind of what it does, but it's not a beat for beat rip off. It's just more of a homage, I guess, to that ilk of story. But yeah, I just thought like it has some great creepy moments, like when the pallbearers fetch the guy's body back in, he's coming and smoke comes out in with him, and it's like, where the fuck are these dudes from? Yeah. The final story, the name of this one escapes me. This is the weakest of the 5 tales for me. I just think it's too long. It takes too long to get where it's going. But besides that, it's still good though. I mean, it's got some, like the portrayal of the lead blind guy, and some of the lines he delivers towards the end of the piece. He does with a great sense of dread and menace to him. Tales from the Crypt, it's up there. I think it's like joint 3rd place for me with Dr. Terror's House of Horrors. This is of a much darker tone because it was a few years later, so they could do more really. The music for this, again by Douglas Gamley, in contrast to how bombastic some of the score for Asylum was, most of the score for this, besides the music that's playing over the opening and closing credits, which is Fugue in D minor by Bach, I believe. Again, that's very similar to how Asylum opens and closes. But apart from that, the music in this is very like the music I mentioned in Reflections of Death. It's just very undertone, creepy, just like atmospheric stuff. And I love that. I love it. It emboldens the stories, you know, gives them all the more power. So yeah, Tales from the Crypt, a solid entry in the Amicus Anthology series. So yeah, thank you for watching, and until you see me again, goodbye.
Holy dog shit!